Okay, did you know that your brain, as a full-grown adult, can literally change its physical structure, building entirely new neural pathways in just a matter of weeks? All it takes is intense focus. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to decode the minds of people who master multiple complex skills. We're talking everything from coding to philosophy. Today, we're digging deep into the science of accelerated learning, pulling from some absolutely fascinating psychological research to show you how to, quite literally, upgrade your own brain. So if you've ever wanted to think clearer, learn faster, and finally break out of your old cognitive patterns, you are in the exact right place. All right, let's just dive right in. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly absorb these wildly difficult skills, while the rest of us just get completely overwhelmed and end up quitting? Think about the last time you tried to learn something genuinely tough. Maybe you sat down to learn a new language, or you tried your hand at Python programming, and after an hour of staring at a blinking cursor or some completely confusing grammar rule, you just slammed your laptop shut in total frustration. You know, it's a wildly common reality for so many of us, but understanding the actual biology behind why some people push through while others give up, well, that is going to completely change how you approach your own personal growth. See, society feeds us this incredibly persistent myth. We're told that polymathy, the ability to master multiple wildly different subjects, requires some sort of innate special genius. We picture historical figures just waking up brilliant, and that leads us to try and learn everything all at once, right? We just cross our fingers and hope we'll naturally absorb it all. But then we inevitably get overwhelmed, and we quit. Science, however, reveals a totally different playbook. Psychological research shows us that massive growth in intelligence actually comes from a biological process called the focused struggle. It's not about being born smart at all. It's entirely about how you strategically apply pressure to your mind. And that brings us to a really vital paradigm shift. Think about this. Difficulty is not a weakness. It is the signal that growth is happening. It's exactly like physical exercise. When you go to the gym and lift heavy weights, your muscles absolutely burn and ache the next day. You don't view that soreness as a failure, do you? No, you view it as proof that the muscle is tearing and rebuilding itself to be stronger. The exact same rule applies to your brain. That intense brain fog or that sharp confusion you feel when learning a difficult skill, that is not a sign that you aren't smart enough. It's the literal physical sensation of your mind upgrading. You are feeling the biological machinery of your brain working in real time. Okay, let's move to section 1, the focused struggle and how single tasking builds the brain. The whole thing really boils down to neuroplasticity. We live in this era of constant multitasking, but trying to learn too many things at once actually shatters your cognitive performance. True polymaths trigger neuroplasticity by committing deeply to one hard skill at a time. The brain absolutely requires deep, singular pressure to change its physical structure. Imagine trying to clear a path through a dense, overgrown jungle. If you run around aimlessly swinging a machete at 100 different bushes, you're going to get nowhere. But by leaning into one single difficult task, letting yourself make mistakes, and just hacking away at that one single path, you are physically rewiring your brain and building strong, permanent new neural connections. On to section 2, upgrading through difficulty, and why easy content creates shallow thinking. So the media we consume every day has massive biological stakes. If you only consume short, simple content like doom scrolling through endless 15-second videos, your brain physically adapts to that specific environment. It gets highly efficient at shallow thinking and chasing quick dopamine hits. Intelligence simply does not grow from content that feels easy to digest. But if you push yourself to engage with difficult, long-form material, maybe a dense science journal or an uncomfortable, heavy philosophical text, you force your brain to hold multiple variables at once. This uncomfortable stretching literally forces a hardware upgrade in your working memory and your verbal reasoning. You are quite literally building a bigger mental RAM. Let's look at section 3, deep processing habits, digging deeper, and the power of silence. So, we know we need difficult material, but how do we process it? Well, average thinking stops at just memorizing facts. You know what happened, you can easily pass a multiple choice test, and boom, that's the end of it. High-level thinking, however, digs furiously into the underlying reasons. Polymaths are notoriously relentless about asking why, to figure out how complex systems operate under the hood. By doing this, you aren't just memorizing, you are building massive mental models and mapping out cause and effect chains. You transition from just knowing a list of isolated facts to actually being able to predict what will logically happen next in a totally complex scenario. But here's the catch. You cannot build those deep cause and effect chains in a noisy environment. In a world of constant input, endless notifications, and screen stimulation actively suppress our ability to focus deeply. To achieve high-level thinking, polymaths require absolute silence. This is the incubation effect in action. Ever notice how your most brilliant solutions to a problem usually pop into your head while you're taking a shower or going for a walk without your phone? That's the incubation effect. By stepping away and disconnecting from external noise, your brain's background processing takes over, finally connecting the dots you've been struggling with to surface your absolute best insights. Which brings us to Section 4, the metacognitive mindset. We'll look at cognitive flexibility, simplicity, and error-based learning. So, let's talk about metacognition. In the simplest terms, this means thinking about your own thinking. The smartest minds possess incredible cognitive flexibility precisely because they actively doubt themselves. Instead of treating their opinions as their personal identity, they ask a very brave question: what if I'm wrong? Charles Darwin actually used to purposely write down observations that contradicted his own theories, simply because he knew his brain would naturally try to forget them. That right there is metacognition in practice. It reduces bias, it strips away emotional reasoning, and it replaces ego with absolute accuracy. Now, to test if they are actually being accurate and truly grasp a concept, polymaths use a simple explanation test. First, they learn a complex concept. Then, they force themselves to explain it simply, like they're talking to a 10-year-old, either out loud or in writing. Finally, they identify any spots where they stumbled, and they go back to fill in those exact gaps. You see, complex jargon is a very common hiding place for weak understanding. When you strip away the big vocabulary words and force yourself to explain difficult ideas plainly, your brain is forced to build an incredibly strong, undeniably clear logical foundation. And hey, even polymaths make mistakes constantly. The difference lies entirely in how they react. While average intelligence tends to ignore or hide failure to protect the ego, high intelligence ruthlessly studies it. When you fail at a task, there's a literal biological dip in your brain's dopamine, which feels absolutely terrible. But if you calmly review what went wrong instead of avoiding that bad feeling, you activate error-based learning. Your brain uses that exact negative signal to sharply map out what not to do next time. Analyzing your failures is, quite literally, one of the absolute fastest ways to improve your reasoning and shape vastly smarter future behavior. All right, wrapping things up with Section 5, your cognitive bandwidth. Choosing the focused struggle over instant comfort. Let's tie all of these biological mechanisms and psychological tools back to the choices you make every single day. Becoming a polymath is not about having a naturally larger or magically gifted brain. Not at all. It is entirely about consistently training your brain to think better. Ultimately, your cognitive bandwidth is the most valuable resource you possess. Expanding it means making a deliberate choice. It means actively breaking your old, comfortable patterns and making the conscious decision to embrace the focused struggle over instant, easy comfort day after day. So, I'm going to leave you with this final question to chew on today. Moving forward, will you protect your cognitive bandwidth by embracing the struggle, or will you settle for instant comfort? The science is super clear. The confusion, the frustration, that heavy brain fog, it's all just the feeling of your brain growing. So, what hard skill are you going to choose to conquer first? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning, keep struggling, and keep upgrading your mind.